Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of September of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we are going to talk about a very important statement that was made by the President of Ukraine, Zelenskyy. During the previous days, he stated that elections are possible if there is a ceasefire. If we can't regain territories by force, we are ready to return them in the future through diplomatic means. This is a good compromise. It's not about territories, it's about Ukraine's independence. If Russia causes a blackout in Ukraine, the Ukraine armed forces will strike Russian energy facilities with American weapons. Ukraine is not winning the war. We don't have enough of weapons. Our biggest problem is that we don't have sufficient air defense. So the question is, what is happening right now with Zelenskyy? Why today, on the 26th of September of 2025, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, he decided to tell us that Ukraine is losing the war. By the way, Zelenskyy is going to attack Russia with the Tomahawk missiles if Russians do a blackout for Ukraine. And most likely Russia will do a blackout for Ukraine in coming months. The question is whether the United States of America will provide Ukrainians Tomahawk missiles. Telling the truth, I have some doubts about this. So once again, why Zelenskyy decided to talk like this today? Why did Zelenskyy said that he is ready for president elections, that he is ready for everything, just stop this war? Most likely because the situation on the ground is very critical and very difficult for the armed forces of Ukraine. As Zelenskyy told us, Ukraine is not winning this war. So let's discuss the situation on the ground. And before we start about the line of combat contact, about the front line, few important things are coming to us from Moldova. I would like to remind you that this upcoming weekend, parliament elections are going to take place on the territory of this European state. And according to information we have, the Russians will do everything they can with the purpose to regain and retake and to take back the real power in this state. Russia wants Moldova to return in their sphere of influence, in their area of interest. And we understand that neither Romania nor any, let's say, European country will allow this to happen. So that is why we expect a significant escalation in this area. And during the previous 24 hours, according to information we have, the Russians attacked the territory along Transnistria. Overnight strikes from the Ukraine armed forces, energy and logistic infrastructure. Detailed report. Over the past 24 hours, the wave of strikes on deployed tractions and distribution substations has continued, leading to prolonged power outages on the railway overhead lines and reduction in the capacity of key logistic corridors. So the most important is not even the details of this strike, but the most important is the geography of this strike. As you can see, the Russians during the previous 24 hours, right before the beginning of the Moldovan parliament elections, attacked the energy facilities and energy constructions along these railways. And obviously, this attack was made just one purpose: to ruin Ukrainian logistic and not to allow the Ukrainians to bring a lot of forces in this area with the purpose to begin, let's say, some special operation on the territory of Transnistria with the purpose, let's say, to restore the constitutional integrity of Moldova. I would like to remind you that several days ago, the president of Ukraine, Zelenskyy, adopted the law that allows him right now to use his forces on the territory of another state. And some military experts reported that most likely, if everything goes wrong during the upcoming weekend, during the upcoming parliament elections, Ukraine may try to use their own forces on the territory of Transnistria. Maybe this is the reason why Zelenskyy is afraid of complete blackout, because if Ukraine does it, most likely the Russians will do a blackout to Ukraine, probably immediately. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. One thing I can tell you for sure, that saying the truth, I'm not sure anybody wants to have another Ukraine, but this time on the territory of Moldova. Obviously, this is going to be very, very heavy war, possible war. And once again, Russians will be involved in this situation without any access to the region. Odessa is in front of Russians. It might be very difficult. It might be very, very difficult for both Russians, Europeans, and this might be the first area where NATO forces will fight with Russians on the ground. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact. And first, let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. If you remember, during the previous video, we reported that several Ukrainian sources confirmed that the Russians launched their major offensive operation in the Dnipropetrovsk region, but without giving us any details where exactly the Russians began this offensive. So as for the end of the 26th of September, we still haven't found out where exactly the Russians are advancing. We can just make some conclusions, some projections, and so on. But at the same time, we received lots of updates from the Zaporizhzhia direction. As you can see, we have icons and we have flags, as you can see. And the most important, that according to information we have, most likely the Russians decided to carry out an assault operation on the Pavlovka and Uspienovka fortified areas. So no doubts the Russians will fight for these two territories with the purpose to capture them completely and to dig in deeper. And this will allow the Russians to outflank the city of Gulyaipolye from the northeast. We came to this conclusion that the Russians are going to fight for this fortified area without any doubts due to map changes that were provided by pro-Ukrainian resources. So in this adjustment of map, we can see how Russians improve their positions in the vicinity of the southeastern part of the settlement of Uspienovka. The Russians, according to this information, captured this stronghold and managed to secure this area. Now, according to this update, the distance between edge positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation and positions of the armored forces of Ukraine, so basically and positions in the area of Uspienovka fortified area, is less than 1 kilometer, so just 1 kilometer, which means that most likely tomorrow or the day after tomorrow the Russians will be able to answer this side of the Uspienovka fortified area, which is located on the Russian side of the river of Yanchul. So this part may be taken by Russians, and this is going to be the beginning of the battle for this area. Furthermore, another pro-Ukraine resource, the same pro-Ukraine resource, published another update, but this time from the Poltavka fortified area. As you can see, they provided very huge change on the ground. This is the situation by the end of the 25th of September, and this is the situation by the end of the 26th of September. Based on this report, we added those territories that were colored by pro-Ukrainian resources in Russian favor. But this, let's say, adjustment is not so important as the gray zone that was added a bit further to the west. So as you can see, we have a territory that was taken by Russians during the previous 24 hours, and we have territories that were marked as a gray zone or contested area. And according to this contested area, the Russians managed to answer the Poltavka settlement from the east. Exactly, the Russians answered that part that is located on the Russian side of the river of Yanchul. So once again, according to pro-Ukraine resources, by the end of the 26th of September, the Russians answered the settlement of Poltavka, and currently the clashes are taking place exactly for the area of this fortified area. So once again, now we have no doubts that not just the Russians are going to continue their assault operation. The Russians have already answered the territories of these two fortified areas, and the Russians, as we understand, are going to establish complete control over this territory before moving further in the western direction towards in the southwestern direction towards the city by the name of Gulyaipolye, the most important stronghold of the armored forces of Ukraine in the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction. If the city of Gulyaipolye falls, I can't even tell you where exactly the Ukrainians would be able to slow down the Russians in this event, in this case. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. The Ukrainians continue saying that they're about to cut the area of Russian breakthrough, and they started talking like this probably a month ago, so somewhere on the 20th or 22nd of August. For the first time since the beginning of Russian breakthrough, they stated that they're about to cut this, let's say, breakthrough area. There are currently 3 cauldrons, according to Ukrainian forces. Every single cauldron is encircled by Ukrainians. Russians suffer losses, and many other different statements we got from Ukrainian side, but without even a single change of the map. At the same time, when talking about pro-Russian resources, they continue their offensive operation, and we continue receiving more and more updates that confirm additional progress on the ground. So let's discuss these changes, and first let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk. If you remember, during the previous day we were talking that most likely due to the fact that the Russians haven't managed to improve their positions in the central part of the city, the Russians would change their tactics, and according to information we have, the Russians did this. The Russians changed changed their tactics and they moved their focus from the central part of Pokrovsk towards the western part of the city. Currently, there are very heavy clashes, and as you can see, we have changes on the ground. The Russians were bombing and attacking this territory with all types of calibers they have. In this video, we can see how Russians were bombing positions of the armored forces of Ukraine along these tree lines, along these fields and fortifications and fortified areas, just with one purpose, is to pin down the Ukrainians and to force them to fall back. And right after this artillery and aviation preparation, the Russians began offensive operation along the railways in these fields between these strongholds and fortifications, and which is the most important, in the western part of the city of Pokrovsk. And as a result of these very heavy and bloody clashes, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and the Russians managed to capture almost the entire western part of the city. At least this information today was provided by pro-Russian resources. So once again, this is the situation by the end of the 25th of September, and this is the situation by the end of the 26th of September. According to this information, the western part of the city of Pokrovsk has collapsed completely. The Russians, as a result of offensive, managed to get the railways to the south of this industrial zone, and the Russians took under control this residential area along M30 road. So the western part is in Russia's hands. Ukrainians currently will suffer very huge problems, because even from this configuration, from this perspective, the distance between edge position of the armored forces of the Russian Federation in the western part of the city of Pokrovsk and the Olympiyska street is less than 5 kilometers, and this is already a total control of Russian FPV drones. During the previous 24 hours, we got some videos of how Russians were hunting and destroying Ukraine vehicles, artillery systems, probably FPV drone operators, crews, and their temporary deployment points with drones exactly in this area along the main supply lines. And obviously, the situation will worsen for Ukrainians in coming days. Most likely, the Russians are not going to stop. Some groups of Russians will continue clearing operation with the purpose to secure this area completely, to capture every single square kilometer, and we believe that some of Russian groups will continue advancing further with the purpose to capture this industrial zone. If Russians can take this industrial zone under complete control, this is going to be the end of the entire Pokrovsk agglomeration, without any chances for Ukrainians to hold this city and this agglomeration for a very long period of time. Ukrainians will be able to hold this agglomeration, let's say, for another several months, but paying significant price. Everything that enter the Pokrovsk agglomeration will stay in the Pokrovsk agglomeration forever without any chances for evacuation. So this is the situation on the western flank, and now let's discuss the situation on the eastern flank. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly to the east of the city of Mirnograd. For example, we have adjusted the map. As you can see, this is the situation by the end of the 25th of September, and this is the situation by the end of the 26th of September. Pro-Ukraine resources published this video, 1 minute and 11 seconds. Probably we have 5 or 6 episodes of how Russians were, of how Ukrainians were FPV droning Russians in different parts of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Lots of episodes, lots of attacks with FPV drones. So this one is the most important episode. This attack of Ukrainians took place exactly in this point, and another attack during this video took place in this point. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that most likely all these fields were captured by Russians. We have colored this territory completely to the east of the city of Mirnograd, but we believe that there are still some pockets of resistance of Ukrainians. Maybe the Ukrainians still control this stronghold. Maybe Ukrainians still control this stronghold or this part of the city of Novoekonomichne. But we understand that Ukrainians are completely encircled in this area without any chances for evacuation. Most likely they still have possibilities to get some supply and support using drones, but it's just a matter of time when the Russians will finish clearing of this area. So we colored. We believe there are still pockets of resistance. We decided not to add anything because we don't know for sure where exactly are them. So we colored the territory, and we see that the Russians, as we can see, summarizing everything, tightened the news around the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and they got a bit closer to the day when the battle for the city of Pokrovsk will be finished. Now let's move further. Let's discuss the situation in the Kostiantynivka direction. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation published this map, and telling the truth, we've been waiting for some changes on the ground that could be provided by, let's say, pro-Russian resources reliable, or we're gonna get some video that will confirm this control of this progress on the ground, but we haven't received anything, so that is why we haven't added any changes on the ground. Currently there are very heavy clashes, and the clashes are taking place exactly in the southeastern part. And once again, as we discussed yesterday, there is one part of the city of Pokrovsk, this one, it's southeastern part, where we don't have anything, no geolocations, no attacks from Ukrainian side. Most of the attacks took place along the perimeter of this area. Russians were bombing Ukrainian positions with multiple launch rocket systems. Russians were attacking Ukrainian forces with FPV drones, but around this area, which means that maybe indeed the Russians captured this territory. We are waiting for, of course, additional geolocations that can confirm this, and if this information is being confirmed, obviously this is going to be a very huge media victory for the Russians and huge media loss for Zelenskyy and for them, for Ukraine. Now let's talk about the Siversk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special. Lots of locations, lots of geolocations, lots of attacks. The Russians continue hunting and destroying Ukrainian positions, temporary deployment points, FPV drone operators, but without offensive operation on the ground. The Russians most likely will not carry out assault operation on the city of Siversk in coming days. Now the Russians are focused on two villages. The settlement of Yampol, this is the primary target for the armored forces of the Russian Federation and this huge forest, and the settlement of Dronovka. The Russians are attacking this territory and strongholds around this area with the purpose to improve their positions between Siversk and Lyman, to cut the logistic of this region, and then to handle with every single direction separately with the city of Siversk and with the city of Lyman. The Russians reported that they are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Zarechna. So they started talking like this probably a week ago, yet without changes on the ground. But we expect that most likely during this coming weekend, the Russians will finish the battle for this area. As for the settlements to the northwest of Lyman, the Russians finished the battle for the village of Dirilova. The Russians improved their positions in the area of the village of Novosilovka, and pro-Ukraine resources confirmed that the village of Shandrigolova fell in Russians' hand. So according to these reports, we adjusted the map, so this flank is about to be taken by Russians, and then they will continue moving further in several directions, in the direction of the village of Drobushova, in the direction of the village of Yarova. Furthermore, when talking about Drobushova, several pro-Russian resources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians have already answered the settlement of Drobushova from its northwestern part, and currently the clashes are taking place exactly for this area. So we can say that today, on the 26th of September, the battle for the settlement of Drobushova has begun. Now let's talk about the city of Kupiansk. Once again, I would like to remind you that yesterday the Minister of Defense published this map, and according to this map, the city of Kupiansk is already caught in colon by Russians. As for the previous 24 hours, several pro-Russian resources reported that the armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions just in the most northwestern part. Few more blocks were taken. Currently, the clashes are taking place for the Yubileyny micro-district. In the western part, if Russians take this micro-district under control from this high-rise building area, they will be able to control not just the western part of the city of Kupiansk, but everything to the east, because according to information we have, the eastern part of the city of Kupiansk is located in the lowlands, and the western part is located on the elevation. So with the fall of the western part of the city of Kupiansk, I think that most of the entire Kupiansk direction will fall automatically. And now let's talk about the Sumy direction. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the Group of Forces North today stated that the assault units of the airborne forces of the Group of Forces North have completed the battle for the settlement of Yunakievka. The settlement was captured by Russians today, and based on this report, we have adjusted the map. So the village of Yunakievka was colored. The battle for this village started probably in March or in the April of 2025. So as you can see, almost 5 months passed since the beginning of battle, and now the Russians can move further. I'm not sure whether the Russians are going to move further. Most of their forces were redeployed in other directions. As for now, we believe that the Russians will try to stabilize the situation and to dig in deeper. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.